There's a world of food most people never talk about, not because it isn't good, not because it lacks value, but because it doesn't have attention. No global branding, no viral marketing, no trending videos pushing it into your feed. Just dishes that quietly exist in the background of everyday life, served in small kitchens, street corners, family-run stalls, local markets, places that don't need to announce themselves because the food speaks for itself. And yet somehow, these dishes remain overlooked, not hidden, just unseen, because attention tends to move toward what is loud, what is familiar, what is already popular. But if you slow down long enough, you begin to notice something different. Some of the best food in the world is not the food everyone is chasing, it's the food most people walk past. Now, let's start simple. Underrated dishes are not lesser food, they are unmarketed food. Food without global exposure, without branding teams, without social media campaigns shaping perception, but often with more consistency, more tradition, and more repetition than anything trending online. Because when a dish doesn't rely on attention, it relies on mastery, and mastery comes from repetition over time. Now, let's define what underrated actually means in food. It doesn't mean bad, it doesn't mean basic. It means under-recognized. A dish can be incredible, but if it doesn't travel well across cultures, or if it doesn't photograph well, or if it doesn't fit trending formats, it stays local, and what stays local often becomes invisible to outsiders. But invisibility is not a measure of quality, it is a measure of exposure. Now imagine walking through a busy street market, steam rising from grills, the sound of oil sizzling, spices mixing in the air, people moving quickly, vendors calling out orders, and among all that noise, there are dishes being made quietly, no branding, no presentation tricks, just food, prepared in real time for people who already know what they want. And those are often the dishes that matter most, because locals don't return for hype, they return for consistency. Now let's go deeper. One of the most common categories of underrated food is simple rice-based meals. To an outsider, they look ordinary: rice, protein, sauce, sometimes vegetables. Nothing visually complex, but simplicity is deceptive. Because when ingredients are few, execution becomes everything. Balance becomes critical, flavor layering becomes intentional, nothing can be hidden, and that is where skill appears. Now think about noodle dishes, not the global chain versions, but the local ones, the kind made in small kitchens, where broth is simmered for hours, not for presentation, but for depth. Flavor built slowly, not rushed, layered over time. These dishes don't demand attention, they earn it. Now, let's shift perspective. Why are these dishes overlooked in the first place? There are several reasons. First, familiarity bias. People trust what they already recognize. Second, visual bias. If something doesn't look impressive, it is assumed to be simple in taste. Third, trend bias. Social media amplifies what is already popular, not what is quietly consistent. And underrated dishes often have none of those advantages. But what they do have is longevity. Because while trends rise and fall, local dishes remain. Now, let's explore something deeper. Many underrated dishes are tied to cultural identity, not just as food, but as continuity. Recipes passed down through generations, adjusted slightly over time but never replaced. They carry history in their preparation, not in storytelling, but in repetition, and that repetition creates stability. Now imagine a dish that hasn't changed in decades, not because it is outdated, but because it works, because it satisfies, because it fits daily life. That kind of consistency is rare in a world driven by novelty. Now let's talk about flavor psychology. Underrated dishes rarely try to impress immediately. They don't rely on shock value. They don't overwhelm the senses at first bite. Instead, they build gradually, layer by layer, taste by taste, and the more you eat, the more you understand them. That is why many people miss them at first. They require attention, not just consumption. Now, let's go deeper into cooking philosophy. Underrated dishes often rely on restraint, not excess. They don't add complexity for appearance. They focus on balance, salt, sweetness, heat, acidity, umami. Everything is intentional, nothing is exaggerated, and when balance is achieved, the dish feels effortless, even though it isn't. Now, let's talk about texture and memory. Food is not only taste, it is memory, smell, texture, temperature. Underrated dishes often connect deeply with memory because they are rooted in everyday life. They are not designed to impress strangers. They are designed to satisfy repeat experiences. That repetition creates emotional attachment, even if people don't consciously realize it. Now, let's shift again. One major misunderstanding about food is this: if it is not expensive or famous, it must be average. But that assumption is incorrect. Price reflects market visibility, not culinary value. Fame reflects exposure, not quality. Some of the most carefully prepared dishes in the world exist completely outside mainstream awareness. Now let's go into how chefs view these dishes. To many chefs, underrated dishes represent fundamentals. Before decoration, before plating aesthetics, before trends, they represent technique, timing, control, and discipline, because when there is no distraction, skill becomes visible. Now, let's explore emotional experience. Underrated dishes often feel comforting, not exciting in a dramatic way, but grounding, familiar without explanation, satisfying without exaggeration. And that comfort is often what people return for, not novelty, but reliability. Now let's slow the perspective. When people travel, they often look for famous food, but the most memorable meals are usually not planned. They happen unexpectedly, at small stalls, in unfamiliar streets, in places with no reputation. And that is where underrated dishes reveal themselves, not in promotion, but in discovery. Now, let's simplify again. Underrated dishes are simple in appearance, rich in history, consistent in execution, local in origin, emotionally familiar, and often overlooked. But above all, they are honest. Now let's expand on honesty in food. Honesty means no performance, no exaggeration, no need to impress visually, just preparation, just flavor, just intention. And that honesty is rare in a world where food is often designed for cameras before mouths. Now let's bring in a wider view. Food culture today is heavily influenced by visibility. What gets seen gets valued, but what is unseen does not disappear. It continues to exist, quietly, reliably, daily, and sometimes more authentically than anything trending online. Now let's move toward reflection. If you only follow popularity, you will only experience what is amplified, but if you explore beyond that, you find depth, variety, and food that has been perfected without external validation. Now, let's approach the conclusion. Underrated dishes are not hidden because they lack quality. They are hidden because attention is selective and attention is limited. But quality does not depend on attention. It depends on consistency, on care, on repetition, on time, and those things exist whether the world notices or not. Now, let's end with the core realization. Some of the best meals you will ever have will not be the ones you planned for. They will not be the ones with the most reviews or the most visibility. They will be the ones you almost missed, the ones without attention, without noise, without expectation. Just food, made well, served simply, and remembered deeply. Because once you experience them, you begin to understand something important. Great food doesn't always need to be seen, it just needs to be tasted. And once it is, it stays with you.